And welcome. It's good to be with you today. And I have a some things that I've been learning through this season of COVID-19, this crisis, whatever you want to call it. It's probably one of the most challenging times of our lives, and it's going to forever, in a sense, be something that we look at that 2020 opened up with. What an opening! And I'd like to maybe talk about 10 questions that come from exile, and 10 questions that maybe deal with my personal growth or your personal growth, or things that come out of the struggle, so to speak. Because if all we take away from this is negative or hopelessness, then we miss the whole mark. Because God's way is always one that brings hope wherever we are in a situation. So I have 10 questions I want to run by you real quick, just to think about for yourself, that maybe you could ask during this time of exile. And the question goes something like this. The first one is, what has this season made you miss the most? And right off the bat, I could think of 10 people I know who said the biggest thing I missed the most in this season is people, just being around people, just hanging out and, having a cup of coffee, going to Starbucks, however they do it. And, or maybe there's something else you missed. So is it fellowship? Is it sitting at a good restaurant maybe, or going to a movie, or just being able to just go and not worrying about germs? Here's a second question you can ask during exile. What do you regret more than not buying toilet paper? I know that sounds funny, but think about it. It's true. What do you regret more than what people are putting priority on? People are saying, well, you got to get all this toilet paper. You got to get all this hand sanitizer. And a phobia is created sometimes that is not even real. That is illusion, in a sense, that people out of fear do things. But what do you regret more than the things society say you should regret? And maybe it's not spending more time with the person you love. Maybe you took them for granted. Maybe you maybe not being able to enjoy the marvel of human touch, of just being able to just grab someone and hug them and say, I love you. And maybe before this crisis, we just didn't put priority on that. Maybe we were naturally distancing ourselves. So that's another question we can ask during exile. And yet, here's another one. What has changed in a good way in your life? Again, these are good questions that we should ask, because if we're only looking at things from a negative point of view, then we're missing the whole mark of knowing Jesus. God wants us to grow through challenging times. And what has changed in your life in a good way? For me, like, I'm kind of a germaphobe in a way, so I love the fact that people are more conscious about, cleaning stuff off. And my wife always said, I'm Mr. Clean. I always like, things clean. And so that's a good change for me. But on the other hand, maybe you've had things that changed in a negative way, right? And that brings you to the next one. What might have changed in a negative way or in a not so good way in your life in this season? And I think many of us can fill those blanks really quickly of what maybe is negatively has changed in our lives. Obviously, the constriction, the isolation, the sense of loneliness, the inability to just go out whenever you want to. And we know that people have different attitudes. Some people are saying, well, I'm going to do what I want and, whatever. But maybe some things changed in a not so good way in your life. Stuff that maybe you were used to enjoying every day, but now they changed. So that's another question we can ask. And but here's a good one here. What is the greatest lesson you've learned? What is the greatest lesson you've learned? That's a good question to ask. Again, because if all we do is ask God, why am I in this pain? Why all this strife and struggle and fear and doubt and depression? Why all this? We have to ask better questions. We have to ask questions that lead us back to God, where we find his power and his presence, and where we find faith for the future. So what is the greatest lesson you learned? And one lesson for me is that isolation can be a good thing if we turn it from loneliness, like Henry Nouwen says, into solitude instead, and learn how to just say, it's okay for me to be quiet today and not have all this stuff running around and craziness. But I also learned this, that God is greater than any crisis, that he's not shocked by this. This didn't take him by surprise. And it's good to know that no matter what we experience, God is always greater than what we experience. But yet, maybe there's another question we can ask today. And the question is this: what did you take for granted before the crisis? What did you maybe realize that you didn't appreciate, that maybe you appreciate now because you don't have it? Is it spending more time with maybe those that you love? Is it maybe connecting with someone that you care about? Or maybe words that you should have said to someone, but maybe you didn't. And now that the crisis is here, you really can't say them because you don't want to say them, over video. You want to say them face to face to someone. Ask yourself that question. What did you take for granted? Because we all take things for granted until we lose those things. But yet here's another question. What new thing, whether good or bad, did you discover for yourself? What new thing, whether good or bad, did you discover about yourself, rather? And one thing I learned is that, I'm older now. I'm 58, and I love being 58. I'm not these kind of people that says, "Oh God, I'm afraid to be 60." No, it's a number, right? We are as old as we feel, and I feel young. I have a young spirit in me. But if there's one thing that I learned about myself, is that no matter how old I am, I can still learn new skills. I can still master new things, and there's a liberty to that. Maybe to some, maybe you're struggling, saying, "Oh man, this Zoom stuff is driving me crazy. This Microsoft Teams, oh, it's driving me crazy. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I hate change." Well, I think the more you embrace change and say, "I'm going to do this because I can do it," it's going to be easier. And for me, I love learning new things. I love mastering new skills. I bought more video equipment and software and things like that. And we're doing stuff for the church, just for future. Even after this, we're going to keep staying online and doing stuff online so that when people can't make it, they can watch it online. But don't be afraid of new things. No matter how old or young you are, you can always learn something new, and it actually keeps you young anyway. But here's another question we can ask. What positive things came out of this with your spouse, your children, your family, maybe your friends? And that's kind of a big question, but what positive things came out of? Because we know that maybe negative things came out. Maybe the isolation caused you to lose your temper, or to say something you shouldn't have said, or do something you shouldn't have done. But what positive things came out of it? What good things came out of it? I know that a lot of people are homeschooling now. Before, homeschooling wasn't as popular, and some people used to, crack jokes at homeschoolers and stuff like that. But you know what? It's become the thing now, and it's become a great thing. And God has a way of just turning things around. It's an amazing thing what God does. And I believe that that's a big positive thing that came. And even though I've talked to moms that are just really tired because they're the teacher now, and they're the encourager, and they're taking care of the house and all these things, and they're reinventing themselves. And that's the beauty of this too, that during these seasons, God can reinvent you and he can reinvent me in a way that we shift with elegance and we pivot back and forth with change in a way that we're not afraid. And one last question that we can ask is, what are you most thankful for? We have actually two more, but what are you most thankful for in this season? What is something you can look back and say, God, you've been so faithful. I want to thank you that you've been so good to me, Lord. And for me, I thank God, and this may sound silly to somebody, but I thank God for my wife, because if I ever got stuck with anybody in this world on an island, I'd want it to be Louisa, because she's amazing. She's a great woman, and I can't think of anybody else who could put up with me to be stuck with. She's a very patient and gracious woman. And we've grown together through this, and we've had great discussions, great debates, and some days you're cranky, some days you're not. That's okay. Get over it, right? You work through it. But I thank God for her, and that he gave her to me 27 years ago. And one last thing that we can ask before we close is, what one amazing thing happened during this season? And I know that's a broad question, and it's a good question to ask, but I know that people in our church have started their own podcasts, and they've grown. They've done amazing. One young lady has a prophetic podcast, which is doing very well on Facebook, and people are just studying the insights of the prophetic and through her wisdom. But maybe you did a project that you never thought you could do before. Maybe you overcame something you never thought you could overcome before. You're going to look back on this season and say, wow, I can't believe God brought me through. It was so amazing. I never thought we'd make it, but we did by the grace of God. And it's going to be something that I believe comes in small doses, because it's going to be a slow comeback, but we will come back by the grace of God. And you watch what God does in this season. You watch what the Holy Spirit, what he does in your life and your family and in your marriage and in your children. And so I want to encourage you today, follow the Lord always and continue to move forward in this season. God bless you.